to have Hugh Yoshida. Hugh is one of the most influential people in the tech industry today. He's been at Hitachi Data Systems since '97. He's the CTO, so he drives the technical direction for Hitachi Data Systems. Hugh's been recognized as one of the most influential people in the industry through his blogs and also through the influence that he has. So he's had awards for those in recent years. Prior to HDS, Hugh was with IBM Storage for 25 years and worked in hardware and software and product management and all sorts of things. So a real leader in the industry, someone who has a huge range of experience, and someone who can really get into technical trends because he's seen them before, and it's easier to anticipate them going forward, I think, if you've been with it for a while. So I'd like to bring up Hugh Yoshida. Thanks.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you. And it's a pleasure for me to come here and be back with SNEA. I think my dealings with SNEA go back from the very beginning, I believe. I think next year will be the 20th anniversary for SNEA, I believe. About, 97, Wayne. Yeah, back in Las Vegas, I think you first elected board directors. I think prior to that, one of my first meetings, we had Michael Peterson was one who kind of originated a lot of this from strategic research, but we had a meeting in Coronado Island near San Diego back in early 97. And the problem was a customer was down, and all the vendors who participated, like IBM, Hitachi, Brocade, McData, EMC, all our equipment worked, but the SAN wasn't working. So that was the beginning of how do we interact, how do we get all these vendors together, how do we solve the customer's problem. Okay, so that was kind of, out of that kind of grew this whole SNEA organization, and it's been adding value ever since. So very, very happy to be here, to be able to present here. Now, Okay, this is from IDC. We're talking about the third platform. This is the transformation that is going to be changing. We went from mainframes to client server. Now we're in the era of SMAC, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. So this is very well known. All the future growth is going to be fueled by this, and we're moving into this IoT, the Internet of Things. So this is having a dramatic impact on everybody, vendors, customers, and so forth. So this is an example of how this is affecting, say, traditional businesses. In the hospitality business, Marriott has been around since the 1920s, I believe. They have a market cap of about 23 billion. They have an IT staff of over 1,000. So a very typical company today. What they're competing against is a software company called Airbnb. And Airbnb, now this number is old, it came from 2013. They were valued at 13 billion. At that time, they were only about 3 years old. Okay, they started in San Francisco. Two people who were trying to, they had a flat. They couldn't afford the rent in San Francisco, so they rented out their spare room. They had air mattresses, and they cooked breakfast for people who would come. Okay, now, how many people do you think they have in IT? You can guess? Certainly not 1,000. 150? Well, the VP of Engineering in 2013 claimed that there were only 5 because their whole IT infrastructure is in the Amazon cloud. Okay, this is presented at an Amazon conference, so it might be a little bit skewed, but nonetheless, it's certainly a lot less than what we have in traditional companies. So what does this allow them to do? Well, if beginning of this last year, in January, President Obama started to normalize relationships with Cuba. We had an embargo against Cuba for about 50 years. So once these embargo was relaxed, we have a tremendous demand for people who want to go to Cuba. Okay, there are expats who haven't seen their family and friends in 50 years. There's business people who want to start businesses, and certainly there are tourists. So by April of that year, Airbnb was already booking rooms in Cuba. How long do you think it will take Marriott to get to Cuba? Okay, it's going to take a while. Okay, now let's say that Marriott does go to Cuba and spends millions of dollars buying or building properties in Cuba, and the political situation in the United States changes. Maybe somebody comes in who wants to build a wall around the United States, and the embargo is reinstated. So what happens then? Marriott has millions of dollars locked up in Cuba. What happens to Airbnb? They shut down their website. Okay. So the rewards and risks are skewed very heavily in favor of these types of companies who have the agility to be able to move quickly. Okay. So this is the new world. Now, it's not just about the cloud technology. It's because the consumer has changed, right? The consumer who goes to Marriott and pays a standard rate for a traditional room now has the choice. He can go to the internet, he can click into the Airbnb site, he can see a list of properties, he can get a house, he can get a flat, he can get a room, or he can get a couch in the living room, okay? So he has a choice. He now becomes empowered. So this is the new reality. It is the empowerment of the customer, and the technologies happen to be able to support that type of consumer. Okay, so that's what's happening. Okay. Now, go forward a couple years, 2015, Airbnb is now $25 billion. So they've more than doubled their revenue since 2013. Okay. Now, how many people do you think they have in IT? I don't know. I really don't know. I have seen, however, on their website, requests hiring people for management positions in what they call operations. Okay, so I assume that it's probably grown, but it's certainly not grown as much as what's required for traditional companies. Okay. So, what's happening? This is IT as it is today, or has been. It's mostly around infrastructure. Okay, most of the expense, the investment, the work is around managing that infrastructure, maintaining that infrastructure. And then maybe the development platforms. Now we're going to virtual machines, VMware, et cetera, Microsoft. Very little of it is focused on the end user. And the end user is the people that we need to reach. Okay? So what we have to do is turn IT upside down. Okay? Less focus on the infrastructure, more on the applications and the end users, more on the analytics. Okay? If a company is going to be successful, they're going to have to flip this over. Now, this is not to say that the infrastructure is not important. The infrastructure enables everything else. So what I call this picture here is the tip of the spear. The tip of the spear that enables everything else is the infrastructure. But we have to automate this infrastructure and make it easy to use so that IT doesn't have to spend the majority of their time on the infrastructure. They need to be spending more of their time on the application and the end user. Okay. So here's some trends that I foresee for the coming year, or what we need to focus on in the coming year. IT is going through a transformation. Every CIO I talk to is going, this is one of their biggest problems. How do they do this transformation? How do they flip that triangle upside down? Okay. It's a matter of culture, it's a matter of skills, it's also a matter of technologies. It requires new processes, okay? The old structure where you have storage administrator, server administrator, VM administrator, database administrators working in silos, passing tickets back and forth, that's not going to work in this type of world. Okay? I talked to a CIO named Herman de Prince. He's the CIO of a pharmaceutical company in Belgium. And he said there are 5 pillars to this transformation that he's following. The first one is that IT still has to maintain quality. Okay? Quality still has to be number one. But the second thing he said is IT needs to specialize. And they need to specialize in new things. Okay? Things like app development, okay? Automation software, Java, analytics, okay? Hadoop, business processes. So these are the things that they have to specialize in. And they have to be specialized in enough depth so that they can make significant contributions to the business. Okay? Not just a shallow, knowing the vocabulary, but being specialized in depth. And to be able to have this specialization, of course, everybody is just bogged down with all this grunt work. They have to relieve and give their people the time to become educated and to learn these new tools. Okay? And so services, he uses services, he outsources some of this he'll put onto the cloud, okay? The grunt work that's holding people back. Now, once you're specialized, then you have to be very good at collaborating, okay, to work in a community. And so what he has done is he encourages people not only to communicate internally, but also externally, utilizing his vendors, because vendors have the expertise in a lot of areas, so he utilizes his vendors. And at the beginning of the year, on a regular basis, he calls all his vendors in together in one room, all competitors, whatever, in one room, and he gives them his vision and strategy for the year. And he expects everybody to align to his strategy. What he doesn't want to have is what he calls ankle biting, where vendors come in and try to find places where they can attack and get business into the enterprise. Okay, so they have to align to his vision if they want to be working with him. So those are the things that he's doing to do that. Now, the next thing he talks about is hatch the egg. And hatch the egg is his term for innovation. Okay, try things, implement fast, but if they don't work out, fail fast. Okay, don't get married to bad ideas. Okay, that was his comment. So try things, innovation. Okay, in Hitachi, we used to have an R&D lab in Santa Clara. We have changed that R&D lab to an innovation lab, which means we don't measure them now on patents. We measure them on projects and failures. Okay, get on to the next thing and do the next thing. Okay. So the last thing he said that's very important for IT is IT needs to market their value. IT does a lot of wonderful things, great things, innovative things, but they don't tell anybody about them. Okay, they don't put the monetary value that the business people, the CFOs can understand. So he talks about marketing and value, and that's very important. Okay. So another trend is application development. That has to go to another level of speed. We can't take months, weeks, even days to implement applications. We've got to do this much faster. So things like DevOps, where development and operations work together all through the application phase. We have componentization, we have microservices, we have automation. There are tools there today to help us to do that. Dave mentioned that you're going to have a session on OpenStack. OpenStack is components that you can put together and you could then automate and do things through templates. So those are important topics to move toward. Okay. Another is data lakes for analytics. Okay, with analytics, there's a lot of heterogeneous data coming from many different sources, okay, and in many areas, domains, okay. So instead of having data warehouses and data marts where you know what you're looking for. You extract ETL into a data warehouse and then maybe ETL into a data mart, keep constantly moving that data. What we want to do is move all that data into one repository in its raw form. Now with hyperconverged systems, with scale-out systems, with virtualization, we can bring the applications into virtual machines on a scaled-out file system, and we can process the data. We can move the applications to the data rather than move the data to the applications doing expensive ETL processes. Okay, so you'll see more of that happening already. Okay, and the analytics platforms, okay, were businesses, because they could not wait for IT to implement some of these applications, they would get their credit card and go to the cloud, EC2, Amazon, or whatever, and get their applications and their analytics. Well, the CIO, CEOs are realizing that that is not an efficient way to do that. It's creating data silos. Okay? So what they're doing is they're moving more of this responsibility back to the IT, to the CIO, because the CIO has the better understanding of what is required for security, for data privacy, for integration, for service level agreements. So you're starting to see more of this, what we used to call shadow IT, moving back into the IT organization. Okay, so here's an example of this is AVG. They're a software security company. They happen to be in, Prague, but they're international. They have over, I think, millions of users. So in their business, when they get hit with a hack attack or a virus, they've got to spin up a bunch of applications right away to try to analyze it and try to solve the hack attack. Okay. And before, it used to take them 56 hours to deploy a configuration, deploy the application, the content, prepare scripts, do the test and final tuning. And because they were in silos where they had to pass the process off to different silos, it took them 10 days to get an application stood up and tested. They implemented OpenStack, and in OpenStack, they used components like Nova for compute, Cinder for the block storage, Neutron for the networks, and for the configuration management they can plug, you don't have to use all of OpenStack's sources. You can plug in your own. So they plugged in Salt Stack for the configuration management, Puppet for the automation. They did use heat templates. And with this, they were able to just simply choose a template, 5 minutes to deploy the infrastructure, 10 minutes for application deployment and test. Okay. And this was all done through self-service, no longer having to pass tickets back and forth. And so they can deploy within 15 to 16 minutes. And this is what they need to do to react to those types of attacks or hack attacks that occur. So this is tools that people have today. Okay? And this is what's changing IT, and this is what people are going toward. So converged solutions, this is another way to speed up the application. Instead of having to connect server, storage, network together, a converged solution that's already pre-configured, that is already orchestrated. So you can plug it into VMware, and through vSphere you can configure a virtual volume. Okay? So this makes it a lot easier. Before, we used to provide these solutions and give the customer or user a white paper on best practices for Oracle RAC. Okay, now we can give them templates, and they can just click into the templates and deploy. So this also helps to increase the agility of applications. In-memory databases, SAP's been doing this with HANA. Recently, what SAP has done is they moved the whole business suite onto an in-memory database. So now instead of having to ETL out of an ERP database and then do your HANA analytics on it, you just do it on the same repository. Okay? So Oracle is going to do the same. Other people are working with in-memory databases. So another thing is, of course, flash devices, and this, I see a lot of sessions here on flash or solid-state memory. It's certainly making a change. It's very transformational. And the recent developments in there, are going to make it possible to replace high-speed disk. This is a cost comparison of 15K hard disk, okay, compared to an entry 10K hard disk versus a solid-state module device. Okay, now you see that already we are lower in price than the 15K disk. And if you take into any level compression, 2-to-1 compression is probably conservative. Even if you had no compression, we're lower than 15K. But considering at least 2-to-1 compression, we're better than 10K drives. And these are prices today. So the cost concerns about flash, they're no longer there. Okay. Now this is because the flash drives have gotten bigger. This is a 6 terabyte, 6.4 terabyte drive. Okay. Compare that to hard disks. Hard disks, if you do use a 6 terabyte hard disk, the reason you got from 4 to 6 terabytes is because you added platters. Okay. 1 or 2 platters, extra heads, so the cost hasn't come down as dramatically. Plus, if you go to 10K or 8K hard disks, now you're doing things like shingled magnetic recording, which impacts performance. Okay? So the only way forward is to go to these higher capacity flash drives. And certainly the performance is already there. And it's going to get better when we implement things like NVMe. So, when I was a student in the university, I worked on the early IBM systems. They were tape and they were punch cards. I went into the military service, and after 5 years I came out, went to IBM to get a job, and IBM, first thing they asked me is what I knew about DASD. I had no idea what DASD was, because tape and punch cards is what I knew. Well, I've been thinking since then, will there ever be a change like this again, where within a span of only 5 years, the whole world changes from tape to disk? Well, I think it's going to happen very shortly now, because the density of flash now, they're going to 3D, where you can stack up 32 layers. At the last Flash Summit, Toshiba talked about 128 layers, or 128 terabyte flash drives. Okay. How many hard disks will it take to equal a 128 terabyte flash drive? Okay. So I think we're right here where flash is just going to take over. Now, the other thing that drives prices down is not just the density, but it's the volumes. How many of these can you sell? Okay. Hard disks were, supported volumes out of the commodity market, the PC market. Well, you see now the PC, the commodity market. iPods first came out with disks. Now it's all solid-state memory. So the volumes that used to be coming from the commodity markets to drive the price down the enterprise market, it's not there anymore. So I think we're going to see a huge acceleration on flash take-up. So what do we have to do next? Well, businesses are going to prepare for the next generation cloud. Now, cloud has been around for at least 10 years, okay? And a lot of things have improved in the cloud. Security, governance, transparency, those things have been technologies around cloud, the automation that we now have in cloud, security. So the technologies have improved, but also the users have improved. We've had experience now with cloud. We know how to set service level agreements. We know how to ensure security. We know how to have transparency into this, okay? So we are better at knowing how to use clouds. Now clouds, there's private, hybrid, and public clouds. Okay, we'll see more hybrid, we'll see more private. The tools like OpenStack that enabled us to automate things in a private cloud, we can then move that into a public cloud. So we're going to see this next generation of cloud, and we're going to see more adoption of cloud. Okay. This whole movement is going to be very disruptive to the IT industry. All the vendors are going to be very much disrupted by this. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But throughout all this, IT needs to play a leadership role in this third platform. Last month, we had a utility company come into our briefing center, and I was expecting to meet the CIO. He usually comes every year. Well, when this company came in, the CIO wasn't there. And during the course of the meeting, I asked the IT director, what happened to the CIO? Why didn't he come? And he said, well, the CIO is no longer there. They were going through a transition from Oracle into SAP. And so they hired a consultant, well-known industry consultant, to come in and to help them, do this transition. During this study, this consultant said, the CIO role is really not adding value. So I think within a couple of weeks, the CIO was gone, and the whole IT department was reporting into the VP of Finance. Well, that was really a shock to me. And so I asked the sales rep, is this a trend? Is this happening in other places? And he said that in his region, there are 2 other customers that have done this. One was a local government, another was a retailer. Okay. Now, if you think about it, if IT is just focused on cost and reducing cost, maybe finance is where IT should be reporting. But if IT is really about innovation, that is really, a tragedy if that's not being done. So let's talk a little bit about the disruption. Okay, we see Amazon Cloud. Now the analysts tell us that for every dollar that goes into Amazon Cloud, it displaces $3 to $4 of infrastructure spend. So Amazon Cloud revenue at $2.6 billion in 2013, it displaced $13 billion of IT spend. So that means there was $13 billion less addressable market for Hitachi Data Systems, for IBM, for NetApp, for EMC. Okay, that market is gone. Okay? So that puts a lot of pressure on IT vendors, but also a lot of pressure on IT itself, because all this infrastructure that they've been caring for and nurturing, okay, it's disappearing. Okay? So it's in the cloud infrastructure. So what do? Instead of trying to compete with the public cloud for infrastructure, we need to change that around and look at enabling applications. Okay? So focus on the applications. So at a retailer, okay, they replaced about 80% of the infrastructure spend by going to a content cloud. Now this content cloud was a hybrid cloud because most of it was on-prem, but also they were using Amazon Cloud as a back end to this to reduce their costs further. So instead of fighting against the cloud infrastructure, they utilize the cloud infrastructure as part of their tiers of storage. Okay? So this is how businesses have to change. Okay? So this is a chart, this is from Jan Bosma, who's the CIO of Heineken. And for a long time we've been saying what we have to do is align IT and business, okay, the alignment of IT and business. Well, Jan is going beyond that. He's saying it's not good enough to align IT and business. What we have to do as IT people is to lead the innovation. Okay? In IT, they're the technology specialists, and the CIO is part of the business executive staff. He should know the business. So in IT, we can bring business and IT together, but because now everything is being driven by these new technologies, okay, the CIO needs to be the leader in driving all this innovation. Okay. So that's essentially the message as I wanted to bring. Any questions or discussions? Yes.
So is everybody else in the room going to be gone in a couple of years?
Well, you know, think, Storage Network Industry Association, you know, you're about infrastructure, right? But, you know, as we said earlier, you're the tip of the spear, okay? If you have the right infrastructure, if you put the right management around it, the automation around it, you enable the rest of that stack. You have to have the right infrastructure, right? So this is still very, very important. It is still the tip of the spear. But you don't want the IT people worrying about how to configure storage, connect it to servers, you know, and all that. You need to be able to put that into a component, a microservice that can be utilized. Yes?
So I always worry when you do the, when there's comparison between flash and hard drives, and you use compression for flash and you use the hard drives by themselves. But I was curious if you think that mass storage is going to migrate into the flash versus performance storage. Do you also think that the mass storage, along with what might could by latency, if that's going to also go to flash?
Yeah, I think mass storage could do it because, you know, we have, if you look at what flashes, you can now get TLC, you know, 3 signal levels in a cell, and then you can stack these up. So think of a 128 terabyte flash module versus how many? 6 into, well, even if you had 10 terabytes, that would be, you know.
Well, we have 10 terabytes today, but, you know, we're looking at the future, so all the technologies, if they're going to survive, will change and evolve. So, you know, it's not as clear to me as what you're like.
Yeah, I think the density, well, you know, and also flash is, there's other things besides flash, you know, other solid state types of technology. So I think even for large capacity or bulk storage, or that it's going to move to non-volatile memories. Because of the, you know, the fact that you can't stack up tracks, but you can stack up cells. 3D sort of has opened up a whole new dimension on this.
But the hard drive guys have their own arsenal of technologies they're working on.
But they're running out of options. I mean, they're doing packaging things now, adding platters and discs and shingled magnetic recording and things like that. But I don't know how to manage a shingled magnetic recording. How do you update? You know, you got to lift off a block. You got to write it up. It's a read, modify, write operation.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
It's a lot like flash. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's actually
more reliable.
There's actually a 60%.
A lot more reliable. Excuse me.
That's right.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there actually is, if you go Q3 2015, Q3 2014, it's actually something like 60% increase in announced product area density for hard drives. That's so that. But I can show you some interesting charts. Actually, all the technologies change continuously. People make these nice curves. Things don't always necessarily go that way. But anyway.
Yeah, you know, the hard disk, it's not just the capacity, it's also the cost curve. You know, and the other thing is you know, Moore's law, you know, density, and then you reduce cost. But there's a corollary to Moore's law, which is you know, just volumes. If you don't have the volumes, you can't drive the price down. And while the other for long-term storage would be tape, and tape still has a very healthy price erosion. Tape is still going to be around for still a long time. You know, people bring the argument of, you know, tapes are still here. Well, tapes are removable. Their technology, their cost erosion curve is still very healthy. The disk curve is flattened out, and it's not removable. So tape is a different animal than disks that we have. Now this is, I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussions and arguments about that. I mean, there's a huge investment in the disk business now. And it's, you know.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, how about the universities and teaching? You know, you talk about your experience where you learned about density, after you got. So I'm wondering if in the universities there's some refocusing of the computer science and IT and so forth.
know, but it still is very important. The right infrastructure is what, you know, is the tip of, like I say, the tip of the spear. So this is still very important. But, you know, the work that you're doing now with NVMe, with OpenStack, and other work that you're expanding it now beyond just a lot of the infrastructure. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.